The air is warm, thick with the smell of damp earth from the nearby Euphrates, the distant bleating of sheep, and the faint, ever-present aroma of baking bread from countless household ovens. You're not a king, not a priest, not even a particularly skilled warrior. You, my friend, are an aspiring scribe, and tonight, you're about to pull what might just be the world's first recorded all-nighter. Forget your modern energy drinks and doom-scrolling breaks. Your only companions will be a reed stylus, a lump of clay, and the flickering light of a sesame oil lamp. Honestly, given the incredibly demanding nature of scribal training and the sheer volume of cuneiform signs to master, you probably wouldn't survive the initial apprenticeship, let alone the pressure of an urgent royal decree demanding immediate attention. The sheer mental stamina required was legendary, even back then. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to see where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world, so drop a comment below. It's always fascinating to see our little community of night owls and history buffs. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the edge of a bustling Sumerian city, perhaps Uruk or Uar. Mud brick houses, some surprisingly tall, crowd along narrow, winding lanes. The sun, a blazing orb in the Mesopotamian sky, is beginning its slow descent, painting the ziggurat, that colossal stepped pyramid at the city's heart, in hues of orange and purple. It's a structure dedicated to the city's patron deity, a constant reminder of the divine order that underpins every aspect of life here. And at the very foundation of that order, more fundamental than even the strongest city walls or the bravest soldiers, is the written word. In Sumer, writing isn't just a practical tool for record keeping. It's seen as a powerful, almost magical invention, a gift from the gods themselves, specifically from Nisaba, the goddess of grain and, crucially, of scribes and wisdom. To be able to capture speech, to record laws, to tally harvests, to recount the deeds of kings and gods. This is a profound skill, one that elevates a person from the common masses. Scribes are the gatekeepers of knowledge, the memory keepers of civilization. They are indispensable to the temples, which function not just as religious centers, but also as vast economic enterprises, controlling land, labor, and trade. They are vital to the palace, drafting royal correspondence, chronicling military victories, and managing the intricate bureaucracy that keeps the city-state functioning. Without scribes, Sumerian society, with its complex irrigation systems, its elaborate religious rituals, and its burgeoning trade networks, would simply collapse into chaos. You feel a mixture of awe and trepidation. The path of a scribe is long and arduous, demanding years, even decades of dedicated study. The cuneiform script, with its hundreds of wedge-shaped signs, each potentially representing a syllable or a whole word, is notoriously difficult to master. Historians still argue whether the earliest forms of writing were purely pictographic, evolving into the more abstract cuneiform, or if abstract concepts were embedded from start. What is certain is that by your time, it's a sophisticated system capable of expressing complex ideas, laws, and even literature. Your own journey began years ago, perhaps as a young boy from a relatively well-off family, as scribal schools, known as edubbas or tablet houses, weren't accessible to everyone. The fees could be considerable, and the time commitment immense. You've spent countless hours hunched over clay tablets, painstakingly practicing your wedges, memorizing sign lists, and enduring the often harsh discipline of your teachers. The Ummiyah, the headmaster, was a figure of immense authority, and tales of his quick temper and even quicker use of the cane were legendary. One Sumerian proverb wryly notes, "The art of the scribe is the mother of speakers, the father of scholars." It highlights the foundational role of writing, but perhaps also hints at the demanding, parental-like authority of those who taught it. A quirky tidbit from this era is that some school tablets have been found with practice exercises on one side, and on the reverse, a rather crude drawing, perhaps a caricature of the teacher, proving that bored students doodling is a tradition as old as writing itself. So, even with divine inspiration and societal importance, some things, like the urge to sketch when you should be studying, are timeless. Tonight, however, there will be no time for doodles. Tonight, a different kind of pressure mounts. The sun has now fully dipped below the horizon, and the sounds of the city begin to change. The clamor of the marketplace fades, replaced by the softer sounds of families settling in for the night, the occasional bark of a dog, the distant strumming of a lyre. But for you, the day is far from over. You make your way, perhaps with a small group of fellow aspiring scribes, towards the edubba, the tablet house, which often serves not just as a school during the day, but also as a workshop for more advanced scribal tasks by night. The edubba itself is a modest mud brick building, probably single-story, with a central courtyard open to the sky, though work tonight will likely be done in one of the smaller, lamp-lit rooms. The air inside is thick with the smell of damp clay, old reeds, and the slightly acrid scent of burning sesame oil from the small, saucer-like lamps that provide the only illumination. It's not exactly the brightly lit, ergonomic workspace you might be used to. Imagine trying to discern tiny, complex wedge shapes on a dark clay surface under the wavering glow of a wick floating in oil. A strain must have been a constant companion. Your education within these walls has been rigorous, to say the least. It wasn't just about learning to write. It was a full curriculum designed to produce well-rounded administrators and scholars. You would have started with the very basics: how to prepare the clay, how to hold the stylus, how to make the fundamental wedge shapes, the vertical, the horizontal, the diagonal. Then came the endless memorization of sign lists, syllabaries, lists of gods, lists of professions, geographical locations, animals, plants, and stones. These weren't just random lists. They were systematically organized, reflecting the Sumerian understanding of the world. One of the most important aspects of your training was mastering mathematics. Sumerians used a sexagesimal system, base 60, which, remarkably, we still use today for measuring time: 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and angles 360 degrees in a circle. You'd be calculating areas of fields for taxation, volumes of grain for storage, and a number of bricks needed for construction projects. It was intensely practical. Beyond the technical skills, the edubba aimed to instill discipline and a strong moral character, at least according to the idealized texts. School exercises often included proverbs and short stories emphasizing diligence, obedience, and respect for elders. One famous text, often called School Days, recounts a student's day. He rises early, fears being late, gets caned for various infractions, talking, standing up without permission, poor handwriting, and tries to appease his teacher with gifts from his parents. It paints a rather grim picture, though some scholars suggest it might be a satirical piece or an exaggeration intended to amuse. Historians still argue whether the accounts of constant beatings in the edubba were a daily reality or a literary trope emphasizing the difficulty of the scribal art. Regardless, the pressure to perform was immense. Failure wasn't just a personal setback. It reflected on your family and could mean a future of manual labor rather than respected scholarship. A quirky detail of scribal education is the existence of model contracts and model letters that students would meticulously copy. These weren't just for handwriting practice. They taught the specific formulas and legal jargon required for various administrative tasks. So, you'd be copying out fictional marriage contracts, land sale agreements, or even letters of complaint, learning the proper salutations and closings. It was a very hands-on, vocational approach. Imagine, instead of writing essays on Shakespeare, you're practicing how to draft a Sumerian lawsuit regarding a runaway donkey. Slightly different priorities, perhaps. Tonight, the usual hum of younger students practicing their signs is absent. The atmosphere is more charged, more focused. The senior scribes, the ones who have already navigated the treacherous waters of the full curriculum, are here, their faces etched with concentration. You are among them, no longer a mere novice, but someone entrusted with tasks that have real-world consequences. The weight of that responsibility settles upon you as you find your usual spot, a low bench, or perhaps just a mat on the floor. The air is still expectant. You take a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that flutter in your stomach. The skills you've honed over years are about to be put to a serious test. Now, let's talk about your tools. They're deceptively simple, yet in your skilled hands, they're the instruments that will shape empires and preserve knowledge for millennia. Your primary tool is the stylus, or edubba in Sumerian, literally tablet reed. This isn't some fancy, mass-produced pen. You, or another member of the edubba, would have carefully fashioned it from a stalk of marsh reed, which grows abundantly along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The process involves cutting a length of reed, perhaps 6 to 10 inches long, and then shaping one end to create the characteristic wedge-like tip. The precise angle and sharpness of this tip are crucial as they determine the shape and clarity of the cuneiform wedges you impress into the clay. Different scribes might have slightly different preferences for their styli, much like an artist has a favorite brush. Some styli might have a triangular tip for making the main body of the wedge, while others might have a more pointed end for finer details or for making the small, round impressions used for numbers. You might even have a small collection of styli, each suited for a slightly different purpose or a different size of script. Keeping them in good condition is essential. A worn or frayed tip will produce messy, illegible signs, a cardinal sin for a scribe. You'd handle them with care, perhaps storing them in a simple leather roll-up or a clay pot when not in use. It's a humble instrument, but it's your connection to the very act of creation, of bringing thought into tangible form. There's a certain intimacy with this tool, born from countless hours of use. You know its weight, its balance, the way it feels in your hand as you press it into the yielding clay. And then there's the clay itself. This isn't just any mud scooped up from the riverbank, though that's where it originates. The clay used for tablets needs to be of a fine, consistent quality, free from pebbles, grit, or organic matter that could interfere with the writing process or cause the tablet to crack when drying. Preparing the clay is a craft in itself. It would be Levi-gated, mixed with water, and allowed to settle so that the finer particles separate from the coarser ones. This fine slurry is then carefully dried to the perfect consistency, moist enough to take impressions easily, but not so wet that it becomes sticky or loses its shape. Think of it like perfectly kneaded dough, responsive but firm. You typically work with a lump of this prepared clay, which you then shape into a tablet. The most common form is a small, rectangular pillow shape, often fitting comfortably in the palm of your hand. Sizes vary greatly depending on the purpose. A simple receipt might be tiny, just an inch or two across. A literary text or a royal inscription could be much larger, sometimes requiring multiple large tablets to form a single work. For tonight's all-nighter, you might be working on several medium-sized tablets, or perhaps one larger, more important document. You'd flatten the clay with your palm or a flat piece of wood, ensuring a smooth, even surface. Some tablets are slightly convex on the inscribed face and flat on the reverse, which might have made them easier to hold or helped with even drying. Historians still argue whether the specific curvature of tablets had a functional purpose or was simply an aesthetic preference that evolved over time. One quirky tidbit is the practice of tablet recycling. If a tablet was just for practice, or if a mistake was made that couldn't be easily corrected, the clay could simply be re-wetted, kneaded, and reformed into a new blank tablet. This was especially common in the edubbas where students went through vast amounts of clay. It's an early form of resourcefulness, born from necessity. However, for important documents, once inscribed and dried, especially if baked in a kiln, though sun-drying was more common for everyday texts, the writing became permanent, capable of lasting for thousands of years, as evidenced by the hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets that have survived to this day. So, you have your reed stylus, your carefully prepared clay tablet. You sit, perhaps cross-legged on a reed mat, the tablet resting on your lap or a low, slightly sloped surface. The dim light from the oil lamp casts long, dancing shadows. You dip the end of your stylus into a small pot of water, not to get it wet, but more likely to clean off any clinging clay particles from previous impressions, ensuring each new wedge is sharp and distinct. The silence in the room is broken only by the gentle scratching and pressing sounds as you and your fellow scribes begin your work. It's a focused, almost meditative process, each mark deliberate, each sign carrying weight. Your humble tools are ready. The long night of inscription has truly begun. The task before you is to transfer spoken words or perhaps existing written notes on a rougher, temporary tablet into perfectly formed, enduring cuneiform script. This isn't like dashing off a quick email. Cuneiform is a complex system, a true labyrinth of signs. By this period in Sumerian history, the script has evolved from its earlier, more pictographic forms into a highly stylized system of wedge-shaped impressions. Each sign is made by pressing the tip of your reed stylus into the damp clay at different angles and with varying pressure. A single sign might consist of several individual wedges, combined in a specific arrangement. There are hundreds, even thousands, of signs to master. Some signs are logograms, representing an entire word or concept, like a picture of a foot meaning to go or to stand. Others are phonograms, representing a syllable like ba, badu. And to make things even more delightfully complicated, many signs are polyvalent, meaning they can have multiple phonetic values or multiple logographic meanings depending on the context. It's like learning a language where the letter can sometimes mean apple, sometimes make the ah sound, and sometimes, just for fun, means zebra if it's next to a q. You have to discern the correct meaning and reading based on the surrounding signs and the overall sense of the text. Talk about a mental workout. Furthermore, some signs function as determinatives, unpronounced markers that indicate the category of a following noun, e.g., a sign indicating that the next word is a god, a city, a wooden object, or a bird. These are crucial for disambiguation, but add another layer of complexity to both reading and writing. Forgetting a determinative, or using the wrong one, could completely change the meaning of a sentence, leading to potentially serious misunderstandings, especially if you're copying a royal decree or a legal document. Imagine the sheer mental effort of holding all these signs in your head, recalling their precise forms, and then executing them accurately on the clay. Your hand, wrist, and fingers must be incredibly well trained, capable of producing consistent, clear wedges time after time. The angle of the stylus, the depth of the impression, the spacing between signs, all contribute to the legibility and, indeed, the aesthetic quality of the script. A well-written tablet was not just functional, it could be a work of art. Some scribes were renowned for their beautiful handwriting, their elegant and precise cuneiform. As you work through the night, you're likely copying from a master document, or perhaps taking dictation, though dictation would be slower and more prone to error for complex texts. If you're copying, your eyes flick back and forth between the original and your own tablet, ensuring accuracy. Every single wedge matters. A misplaced wedge, an extra one, or one made too heavily or too lightly can alter a sign and, consequently, the word. It demands unwavering concentration. Historians still argue whether scribes typically sounded out the words as they wrote, even silently in their heads, to keep track of the phonetic components, or if experienced scribes could recognize and reproduce whole word forms more holistically. Given the complexity, a combination of both strategies seems likely. A quirky aspect of cuneiform is the way it was typically written and read. Early Sumerian was often written in vertical columns, from top to bottom, right to left. However, over time, the script was rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise, and text came to be written in horizontal lines from left to right, much like modern English. This shift happened gradually, and for a period, you might encounter texts written in either orientation or even a mix. This rotation also changed the appearance of the signs themselves, as what was originally a vertical wedge might now be horizontal. For tonight's all-nighter, you're likely using the more established left to right horizontal lines. Think of the mental dictionary you possess. Not just words, but the visual patterns of hundreds of signs. You need to know how to form the sign for king, lugel for god, dinger for house, e for barley, se for silver, kubabber, and countless others, including all their syllabic variations. You also need to be familiar with grammatical elements, prefixes, suffixes, infixes that modify the meaning of words. Sumerian is an agglutinative language, meaning it strings together multiple morphemes, meaningful units, to form complex words. This is all encoded in the cuneiform. So, when you see a long string of wedges, you're not just seeing individual signs, you're parsing a complex grammatical structure. It's like being a code breaker and an artist simultaneously. The sheer intellectual feat of literacy in this environment cannot be overstated. And you're doing it by the dim, flickering light of an oil lamp, with the pressure of a deadline looming. No wonder your eyes are already starting to feel gritty. Your day as a Sumerian scribe, even one not pulling an all-nighter, is long and demanding. It typically begins before sunrise. There's no hitting the snooze button on your clay alarm clock because, well, they didn't have those. You'd rise with the first light, perhaps perform some ablutions, and eat a simple breakfast, likely barley bread or porridge, maybe some dates or figs if they were in season. Then, it's off to the edubba or your place of work, be it a temple archive or a palace office. Punctuality is paramount. Remember that school days text? The student frets about being late and incurring the teacher's wrath. This emphasis on timeliness likely carried over into professional scribal life. Assignments had deadlines, inventories needed to be current, and correspondence required prompt attention. The concept of 9 to 5 is millennia away. You work when there is work to be done, and in a thriving Sumerian city, there is always work to be done. The bulk of your day is spent, quite simply, writing or reading. You might be drafting administrative texts, lists of goods entering or leaving temple storehouses, grain, beer, oil, textiles, livestock, receipts for transactions, labor rosters, tracking workers assigned to canal digging or temple construction, or legal documents like contract for sales, loans, or marriages. Each of these requires a specific vocabulary, a precise format, and unwavering attention to detail. An error in a grain tally could mean someone doesn't get their rations or the temple is shortchanged. An ambiguously worded contract could lead to lengthy and costly disputes. The fate of individuals, and indeed the smooth functioning of the economy, rests on the accuracy of your wedges. You might also be involved in land surveys, measuring fields, and calculating their area for purposes of rent or taxation. This requires not just literacy, but strong numeracy skills, applying those base 60 mathematical principles you learned in the edubba. Imagine trudging out to a field under the blazing Mesopotamian sun with measuring ropes, perhaps knotted at regular intervals, a set of stakes, and your clay tablets and stylus to record the dimensions. Then, back in the relative cool of the archive, you perform the calculations. It's a far cry from simply copying texts in a quiet room. Some scribes specialized in particular areas, becoming experts in, say, legal matters or astronomical calculations. Lunch if taken formally, would likely be another simple affair, perhaps more bread, some vegetables, maybe a bit of fish if you live near a waterway and could afford it. Breaks are few and far between. The emphasis is on continuous, focused effort. The sheer volume of record-keeping required to manage a Sumerian city-state is staggering. One estimate suggests that in the city of Lagash around 2400 BCE, temple households managed tens of thousands of acres of land and employed thousands of people. Every aspect of this needed to be documented. Historians still marvel at the meticulousness of Sumerian bureaucracy, all made possible by your profession. As the afternoon wears on, the light begins to fade. For many, the workday would wind down with the setting sun. But for scribes, especially those in high-demand roles, or like tonight, facing a special commission, the work often continues by lamplight. There's no concept of overtime pay in the modern sense, though a diligent and skilled scribe might receive bonuses in the form of extra rations, prestige, or opportunities for advancement. A quirky, though perhaps not so humorous, aspect of a scribe's life was the potential for being held responsible for the content of what they wrote, even if they were just taking dictation from a superior. If a decree proved unpopular or a prophecy inaccurate, the messenger, or in this case, the inscriber, could sometimes bear the brunt of the displeasure. It added a certain frisson to the job, beyond just getting the wedges right. So, your typical day is a marathon of mental exertion, of precise manual dexterity, and of navigating complex social and economic structures. It's a life of routine, but also one of immense importance. You are a cog, yes, but a vital one, in the intricate machinery of Sumerian civilization. And as the shadows lengthen and the city quiets, your stylus continues to move, a tiny instrument shaping the vast narrative of your time. Today, however, is not a typical day. Today, the setting sun doesn't signal an end, but a beginning of a much longer, more intense period of work. The relative quiet of the late evening in the edubba is suddenly broken. Perhaps a breathless messenger arrives, his sandals dusty from a hurried journey across the city. Or maybe a stern-faced temple administrator, one you recognize by his important-looking cylinder seal and slightly imperious air, enters the room where you and a few other senior scribes are diligently working on routine tasks. There's a different energy now, a palpable sense of urgency that cuts through the usual scholarly calm. The news is delivered, perhaps in hushed, serious tones. A new edict has come directly from the NC, the ruler or governor of your city-state, or even the Lugal, the king, if your city holds sway over others. It's a matter of great importance, perhaps a new set of regulations regarding trade along the canals, a call to muster citizens for a corvée labor project like strengthening the city walls, or an announcement of a significant religious festival requiring specific offerings from various districts. Whatever the content, the key instruction is clear: multiple copies are needed, and they are needed by morning. Not next week, not in a few days. By the time the sun rises and the city awakens, these official pronouncements must be ready for dissemination. This is where your specialized training and, tonight, your endurance truly come into play. This isn't a task for a junior scribe still struggling with their basic sign lists. This requires speed, accuracy, and the ability to produce clear, legible, and authoritative-looking tablets under immense pressure. There's no room for error. A poorly copied edict could cause confusion, unrest, or even disobedience, with serious consequences for the city's order and for those responsible for the mistake, which ultimately includes you. You feel a surge of adrenaline, mixed perhaps with a familiar sense of resignation. An all-nighter. It's not the first time, and it likely won't be the last. The demands of the state and of the gods are absolute. You quickly clear your current workspace, pushing aside any less urgent tablets. Fresh, Perfectly prepared clay is brought in, perhaps by an assistant or a junior apprentice who is now looking at you with a mixture of awe and pity. Your best styli are selected. The oil lamps are refilled, their wicks trimmed for maximum, albeit still meager light. The master copy of the edict is laid before you. It might be a single, meticulously inscribed tablet, or perhaps a series of tablets if the decree is lengthy. Your task is not just to transcribe the cuneiform signs, but to replicate the layout, the spacing, the very feel of the official document. Consistency is key. All the copies destined for different parts of the city or for different officials must be virtually identical. Imagine the intensity of this replication process. It's not creative writing. It's painstaking, high-stakes duplication. One modern analogy, albeit imperfect, might be a medieval monk in a scriptorium copying a sacred text, but with the added pressure of a royal deadline and the unforgiving nature of clay as a medium. Historians still debate the exact methods used for ensuring accuracy in multiple copies. Was there a system of proofreading by a second scribe, or did the initial scribe bear sole responsibility? For a rush job like this, meticulous self-checking as you go is probably your primary line of defense. You might work in silence. The only sounds the rhythmic tap-tap scratch of styli on clay, the occasional soft sigh, the pop and hiss of the oil lamps. Or perhaps there's a low murmur as scribes confer quietly on a particularly complex passage or an ambiguous sign in a master copy. There's a sense of shared purpose, of camaraderie born from facing a difficult challenge together. You're all in this until the first rays of dawn touch the ziggurat. A quirky detail related to royal decrees and official communications in the ancient Near East is the use of cylinder seals. High officials, and certainly the king, would have their own unique cylinder seal, intricately carved with a design and often an inscription. This seal would be rolled across the wet clay of a completed tablet, leaving its impression as a mark of authenticity and authority, a bit like a signature and a notary stamp combined. So, after you've perfectly copied the edict, and before the clay dries too much, the appropriate official, or a trusted scribe acting on their behalf, would roll the seal, validating your work. The thought of that final, authoritative impression is perhaps a small motivating factor as you press on through the deepening night. The palace edict has arrived, and with it, the demand for your total focus and tireless effort. The city sleeps, but its wordsmiths are wide awake. It's not just the palace that has urgent demands. The gods, too, require meticulous and timely accounting. Alongside the royal edict that has you burning the midnight sesame oil, there might be another pressing task originating from the city's main temple complex. Perhaps a major festival is approaching, or an unexpected event, a drought, a flood, a portentous omen, has necessitated a flurry of ritual activity and, consequently, a need for updated inventories of sacred offerings. The temples in Sumer are not merely places of worship. They are vast economic engines, owning large tracts of land, employing numerous personnel, from priests and priestesses to farmers, brewers, weavers, and craftsmen, and managing storehouses overflowing with goods. These goods are considered the property of the temple's deity. The grain belongs to Inanna, the sheep to Demusid, the beer to Ninkasi. And just like any large estate, careful records must be kept. Offerings flow in daily: livestock, grain, bread, beer, oil, textiles, precious metals, and exotic incense. These are then redistributed as rations to temple personnel, used in elaborate rituals, or sometimes even traded. Keeping track of this constant inflow and outflow is a monumental scribal task. Tonight, let's imagine a specific scenario. Perhaps the priests have decreed a special series of offerings to appease a deity believed to be angered by some recent event. This requires an immediate and accurate inventory of all available sacrificial animals of a particular type, say unblemished white lambs, or a precise accounting of the finest quality cedar wood and lapis lazuli held in the temple treasury, needed for the hasty construction or adornment of a new sacred object. The information is needed now, so the rituals can proceed correctly at dawn. An error in the count could mean an inadequate offering, potentially further angering the god, a prospect no one in Sumer wants to contemplate. Remember, these people live in a world where the favor of the gods is seen as directly linked to the prosperity and survival of their city. So, while some of your colleagues are diligently copying the royal edict, you and a few others might be dispatched to the temple archives, or perhaps a senior temple scribe brings the urgent request to your edubba. The atmosphere here is subtly different from that of the palace administration. There's an added layer of sanctity of dealing with matters directly concerning the divine. The language used in temple records might even be slightly different, employing specific honorifics for gods or particular terminology for ritual items. Your task might involve collating information from various smaller, day-to-day records, delivery chits, ration lists, offering receipts, to produce a comprehensive summary. Or, more dramatically, you might be sent into the actual temple storehouses, accompanied by a priest or temple overseer, to conduct a physical count by lamplight. Imagine yourself in a vast, cool, dimly lit storeroom, the air thick with the scent of aged grain, fragrant oils, and perhaps the slightly metallic tang of copper tools. Rows upon rows of large pottery jars line the walls, each originally marked with a small clay tag or bulla indicating its contents and quantity. Your job is to verify these, update records, and note any discrepancies. It's like being an ancient auditor, but with the added pressure that your audit report is for the gods. Historians still debate the exact level of direct involvement scribes had in physical inventory versus relying on reports from other temple staff, but for urgent tasks, direct verification seems plausible. A quirky detail about temple economies is the sheer variety of goods they managed. It wasn't just agricultural produce. Temples received shares of everything. Fish from the rivers, reed from the marshes, bitumen for waterproofing boats and buildings, wool and flax for textiles, and even finished goods like pottery, tools, and luxury items. Some temple workshops produced these goods themselves. Keeping track of this diverse inventory, with different units of measure for each item, required considerable organizational skill and a very detailed classification system, all reflected in the cuneiform lists you are now poring over or creating. You might be cross-referencing a delivery of 20 gur of barley with an outgoing disbursement of 5 sela of fine flour for the god's daily bread offering, ensuring the temple's chief baker has what he needs. The pressure is immense. The chief priest expects your figures to be flawless. The well-being of the entire community, in their worldview, could depend on the accuracy of the temple's accounts and the correctness of its rituals. So, you focus your stylus flying across the fresh clay, listing quantities, noting conditions, ensuring every item destined for divine attention is properly recorded. The flickering lamplight dances on the rows of jars, on the piles of textiles, on the very tablets that hold the temple's wealth in their delicate wedges. The gods are watching, or so it feels, and their inventory brooks no delay and no mistakes. The night deepens. Outside the walls of the edubba, or the temple complex, the city is shrouded in an almost primal darkness, broken only by the stars, if the sky is clear, and perhaps the occasional watchman's torch. Inside, your world has shrunk to the small circle of wavering light cast by your sesame oil lamp. These lamps are simple, typically shallow, saucer-like pottery dishes with a pinched lip to support a wick, which would have been made from a twist of flax or perhaps a reed. The fuel is sesame oil, a common product in Mesopotamia, prized for its relatively clean burn compared to, say, animal fat, though clean is a relative term. The light they produce is meager, yellowish, and prone to flickering with every slight draft or movement. It casts long, dancing shadows that writhe on the mud brick walls, sometimes making it difficult to distinguish the fine details of the cuneiform signs on the master document or on the tablet you are meticulously inscribing. Your eyes, already strained from hours of close work during the day, are now under immense duress. You find yourself leaning closer and closer to the clay, your nose almost touching the surface. Try to ensure each wedge is perfectly placed, perfectly formed. The constant adjustment of focus from the original document to your own tablet, then back to the stylus tip, is exhausting. Smoke is another unwelcome companion. Even the best sesame oil lamps produce a thin, acrid smoke that stings your eyes and irritates your throat. The air in the small, enclosed workspace grows heavy and stale as the night wears on, thick with the smell of burning oil, damp clay, and the concentrated effort of human bodies. There's no ventilation system, no air conditioning to clear the haze or offer a refreshing breeze. You might occasionally pause to rub your burning eyes or cough discreetly to clear your throat, but there's no real respite. The work must continue. And then there's the simple, profound weariness. Your back aches from hunching over your low workspace, perhaps a mat on the floor or a very low bench. Your shoulders are stiff, your neck is sore. Your writing hand, the one gripping the reed stylus, is likely cramping. You might try to stretch your fingers, to rotate your wrist, but the relief is fleeting. The mental fatigue is just as potent. Maintaining the intense concentration required for accurate cuneiform transcription for hour after hour is a Herculean task. Signs might start to blur together, or you might find your mind drifting just for a second, which could be disastrous if you miss a wedge or repeat a line. Historians still argue about the specific types of oils used in lamps and their relative brightness or smokiness, but it's universally agreed that ancient lighting was a far cry from our modern standards. Some scholars suggest that multiple lamps might have been used for critical tasks, clustered together to provide a brighter, though still smoky, illumination. You might have 2 or 3 lamps casting their pooled light onto your workspace, but this also means more heat and more smoke in your immediate vicinity. A quirky and rather relatable tidbit is that archaeologists have found ancient lamps with soot still clinging to their rims, a silent testament to countless nights spent working or living by their dim glow. Imagine the cumulative effect of this smoke on the lungs of people who regularly worked late, like scribes. It's a small, often overlooked detail, but speaks to the physical hardships of ancient life, even for a respected profession. It wasn't just about intellectual prowess. It was about physical endurance in less than ideal conditions. Think of it. You're essentially trying to perform high-precision data entry in a smoke-filled, poorly lit room, using a pointy stick and a piece of mud, with the fate of royal decrees or divine offerings hanging in the balance. No pressure, right? You blink, trying to clear your vision. The flame sputters, threatening to die. You carefully reach out to trim the wick with a small twig or a specialized tool, or perhaps add a little more precious oil from a nearby flask, careful not to spill any. Every drop of oil is a resource. Every moment of light is crucial. The battle against the encroaching darkness, both literal and figurative, is a constant one. The flickering lamps in your weary eyes are a defining feature of this long, Sumerian all-nighter. You take a slow, deliberate breath, try to push past the fatigue, and refocus on the tiny wedges that hold so much meaning. As the hours crawl by, marked perhaps by the slow descent of the moon or the changing positions of the stars visible through a high window or the courtyard opening, your body begins to send urgent signals of protest. The mental fatigue is profound, but physical needs also assert themselves. Chief among these is hunger and thirst. You've been working for many hours now, well past the time of the usual evening meal, and the energy reserves from your last simple repast of barley bread and perhaps some onions are long depleted. Sustaining oneself through an all-nighter in ancient Sumer isn't a matter of raiding a well-stocked refrigerator or ordering a late-night takeaway. The options are far more limited and considerably less appealing than a modern midnight snack. What kind of rations would be available to a scribe burning the midnight oil? It would likely be simple, portable, and require no cooking. Think dried foods, things that could be kept on hand without spoiling quickly. Dates are a strong possibility. The date palm was a vital resource in Mesopotamia, providing not just fruit, but also wood, fibers, and shade. Dried dates are energy-dense, sweet, and easily transportable. A handful of dates might provide a much-needed sugar rush to combat flagging concentration. Figs, similarly, could be dried and stored. These fruits would offer a quick source of calories to keep you going, though perhaps not the most balanced nutrition for a marathon work session. Bread, of course, is a staple. You might have some leftover barley bread from earlier in the day, a flat, perhaps slightly coarse, but filling source of carbohydrates. It wouldn't be fresh and warm from the oven at this hour, more likely a bit dry and chewy. Paired with a little water, it would help to stave off the worst hunger pangs. There's a certain grim humor in imagining these highly educated individuals, the intellectual elite of their society, gnawing on a piece of stale bread in the dead of night, all in the service of bureaucratic efficiency or divine appeasement. What about drinks? Water is the most obvious and essential. You'd have a small clay cup or beaker and access to a larger jar of water, hopefully cool and relatively clean, drawn earlier from the river or a well. Staying hydrated would be crucial, especially in the warm Mesopotamian climate, even at night. Dehydration would only exacerbate the fatigue and make concentration even harder. Beer, Cass, was another ubiquitous beverage in Sumer, often consumed daily by people of all social classes, as it was generally safer to drink than untreated river water. However, the beer provided as rations was typically a weaker, less intoxicating brew, more like a liquid bread. Would you risk drinking even a mild beer when clarity of mind is paramount for copying intricate cuneiform? Perhaps a very small amount, or perhaps you'd stick to water to be safe. Historians still debate the exact alcohol content of daily ration beer and whether it would have been consumed during demanding work. More luxurious or stimulating options are unlikely. Coffee and tea are many centuries and thousands of miles away from arriving in Mesopotamia. Spiced wines existed, but were likely reserved for feasting or the wealthy, not for scribal drudgery. You're not going to find a Sumerian equivalent of an energy drink. Your fuel is basic, functional, and probably quite monotonous. A quirky detail related to Sumerian food is the sheer number of words they had for different types of bread and beer, reflecting the importance of these staples in their diet and economy. They had different breads based on the type of flour, the baking method, and any additions like dates or oil. Similarly, beers varied in strength, color, and ingredients. Your midnight ration, however, is probably from the lower end of that extensive menu. It's not about enjoyment. It's about caloric intake to keep the human machine running. So, you might pause for a few moments, your stylus resting on the edge of your clay tablet. You reach for a couple of dried dates, chewing them slowly, trying to draw out the small burst of energy they provide. You take a sip of water, the coolness a brief respite for your dry throat. There's no real break room, no comfortable lounge. You eat and drink at your workstation, ever mindful of the task that still stretches before you. The taste of slightly dusty dates and stale bread is the taste of dedication, the flavor of an ancient all-nighter. It's just enough to keep the fog of exhaustion at bay for a little while longer, allowing you to return your gaze to the complex dance of wedges on clay. As the night wears on and the physical discomforts mount, the aching back, the gritty eyes, the gnawing hunger only partially appeased by dry bread and dates, your mind, too, begins to feel the strain. The intricate cuneiform signs, usually so familiar, might start to swim before your eyes. Concentration, your most vital tool, becomes a slippery thing, hard to grasp, harder to hold. It is in these moments of deep fatigue and mental fog that a Sumerian scribe might turn, however subtly, to a source of aid beyond their own resilience, divine assistance. The patron deity of scribes, as we've mentioned, is Nisaba, also known as Edubba. She is not one of the most powerful or prominent gods in the Sumerian pantheon, like Enlil, the king of the gods, or Inanna, the goddess of love and war. Yet for you in this specific struggle, Nisaba is paramount. She is the goddess of grain, of accounting, of writing, and of wisdom. Her symbols often include a stylus and a clay tablet, or sometimes stalks of grain. She is intrinsically linked to the very act you are performing. It is said that she established the first libraries and that the intricate patterns of a leopard skin were an inspiration for her invention of writing, a rather poetic origin story. In the depths of your exhaustion, with the pressure of the deadline looming, you might offer a silent, internal prayer to Nisaba. There wouldn't be an elaborate ritual or a public incantation. Not here, not now. It would be a personal plea, a whispered hope for clarity of mind, for a steady hand, for the ability to see the signs correctly and transcribe them without error. You might visualize her image, perhaps as depicted on a temple relief or a cylinder seal, a serene goddess, often seated, holding the emblems of her craft. You ask for her blessing on your work, for her to guide your stylus and prevent your weary mind from making a critical mistake. Sumerian religion was deeply integrated into daily life. The gods were not distant, abstract beings. They were active participants in the world, their moods and actions directly affecting human affairs. Appeasing them, seeking their favor, was a constant concern. While major temple rituals were the domain of priests and priestesses, personal piety and small, informal prayers were common. Historians still argue about the extent to which ordinary people felt a personal connection to the major deities versus local or household gods. But for a specialist like a scribe, invoking the patron deity of their profession would have been a natural recourse. It's not that you expect Nisaba to magically complete the tablet for you. Rather, you're seeking a subtle influence, a divine nudge to help you maintain focus and precision when your own human capacities are flagging. It's a way of acknowledging the limits of your own endurance and appealing to a higher power associated with the very skills you are employing. This quiet act of faith might provide a psychological boost, a moment of renewed resolve. It's a way of framing your struggle not just as a tedious task, but as something connected to a larger, divine order. A quirky, though perhaps not directly related to all-nighters, aspect of Nisaba's worship is her association with dream interpretation. Scribes, being literate and learned, were sometimes called upon to interpret omens and dreams, and Nisaba was thought to grant insight in these matters. While you're probably too tired for vivid dreams right now, her connection to wisdom and understanding resonates with your current need for mental acuity. You're not trying to divine the future. You're just trying to accurately record the present or the recent past in the form of the edict or inventory. So, in the flickering lamplight, surrounded by the tools of your trade, you take a moment. Perhaps you close your eyes briefly, not in sleep, but in a moment of focused intent. You murmur Nisaba's name, or a short phrase of invocation. Oh, Nisaba, wise one, let my eyes be clear, let my hand be steady, let these wedges be true. It's a small ritual, almost unconscious, born from years spent in the edubba where her presence was always acknowledged. Then, with a slightly renewed sense of purpose, or perhaps just a sliver more hope, you pick up your stylus once more. The night is still long. The tablets are still waiting. But perhaps, just perhaps, the goddess of scribes is watching over her diligent, if exhausted, servant. Despite your best efforts, your steady hand, and even your whispered prayers to Nisaba, mistakes are inevitable, especially when fatigue begins to cloud your judgment and dull your precision. Working with damp clay as your medium presents unique challenges when it comes to corrections. You can't just hit a backspace key or use an eraser to neatly remove an error mark. The process of fixing an error on a Sumerian clay tablet is a delicate and sometimes frustrating operation in itself. If you realize you've made a mistake quickly, while the clay is still perfectly moist and pliable, the correction can be relatively simple. You might use the blunt end of your stylus, or even your fingertip, to gently smooth over the incorrect wedges, effectively erasing them by leveling the clay surface. Then, you carefully reinscribe the correct signs in the smoothed-over area. This works best for small errors, a single misplaced wedge, a slightly malformed sign. However, you have to be careful not to overwork the clay in one spot, as this can make it too wet or create an uneven surface that's difficult to write on clearly. If the error is larger, or if the clay has begun to dry even slightly, smoothing it over might not be enough, or might create a messy, noticeable patch. In such cases, a more drastic approach might be needed. You could take a small, sharp tool, perhaps a different type of stylus or a thin blade of reed or bone, and carefully scrape away the offending section of clay. This requires a very steady hand, as you don't want to gouge the tablet too deeply or disturb the surrounding, correct inscriptions. After scraping, you might need to lightly re-moisten the area with a tiny dab of water on your fingertip to make the surface receptive to new impressions, then reinscribe. This is a more time-consuming fix and can leave a slightly visible mark on the finished tablet, a subtle scar testifying to the correction. For very significant errors, or if a whole section is hopelessly jumbled, the scribe might have no choice but to declare the tablet a loss. If it's a practice tablet in the edubba, it's simple enough. The clay is just re-kneaded and reformed. But if it's an official document, like the royal edict you're currently toiling over, starting again on a fresh tablet is a deeply unwelcome prospect, especially when time is of the essence. It means all the work done on that particular tablet up to that point is wasted. The thought of this is enough to make you doubly, triply cautious with every wedge you press. Historians have found many cuneiform tablets that show evidence of corrections, smoothed over areas, scraped sections, or signs squeezed into tight spaces where an omission was later noticed. These paleographical details offer fascinating glimpses into the working methods of ancient scribes. Sometimes, you can even see where a scribe has tried to write over an existing sign without fully erasing it, leading to a muddle of wedges that modern scholars have to carefully disentangle. It's a reminder that these ancient documents were handmade, human products, complete with imperfections. A quirky, and perhaps slightly amusing, aspect of scribal errors comes from school tablets. Some student exercises are riddled with mistakes, and occasionally, you can see the teacher's corrections marked on the tablet, sometimes with a more forceful or larger wedge, or even a critical comment inscribed in the margin. One can almost feel the student's frustration and the teacher's exasperation radiating from the clay after thousands of years. It makes you appreciate the skill of the professional scribes who could produce largely error-free, complex texts under pressure. Tonight, as you labor through the royal edict or the temple inventory, every potential error is a source of anxiety. You find yourself checking and rechecking each sign, each line, comparing it meticulously to the master copy. If you do spot a mistake, a wave of frustration might wash over you. You pause, assess the damage. Can it be smooth? Does it need scraping? You reach for your erasing tool, perhaps the flattened end of a reed, or a specially shaped piece of wood, and carefully set about the repair. Each correction costs precious time and energy, resources you have in dwindling supply. The desire to produce a perfect, flawless tablet is strong, not just for professional pride, but because the importance of the document demands it. The art of erasing, or rather, skillfully mending, clay errors is a crucial, if unsung, part of the Sumerian scribe's toolkit, especially on a long night like this. As you meticulously work on your assigned tablet, surrounded by the quiet focus of your fellow scribes, you are not entirely isolated. You are working within a space that is, in itself, a testament to the power of the written word, the archive or tablet repository. Whether you are in a dedicated room within the edubba, a chamber attached to the palace, or a secure area within the temple complex, the silent watchers are all around you. Countless other clay tablets, neatly arranged and stored. Imagine shelves, probably made of wood or built directly into the mud brick walls as niches, lining the room from floor to perhaps head height or even higher. On these shelves, or packed into clay or reed baskets or wooden chests, are hundreds, possibly thousands of tablets. They represent the accumulated knowledge, the administrative memory, and the cultural heritage of your city. There are economic records stretching back years, even decades, tallies of grain, lists of livestock, receipts for taxes paid in kind. There are legal documents, marriage contracts, deeds of sale, court judgments, and collections of laws like the famous codes that would eventually emerge from this region. There are diplomatic correspondences with other city-states, some friendly, some clearly hostile. And if this archive is particularly comprehensive, there might even be literary texts, hymns to the gods, epic poems recounting the deeds of ancient heroes like Gilgamesh, proverbs offering wisdom, and perhaps even early scientific texts like star charts or medical treatises. Each tablet is a small, dense brick of information. Some are tiny, finger-sized notes. Others are large, heavy slabs that require 2 hands to lift. They might be organized according to a system, perhaps by subject matter, by year, or by the office that produced them. Large, important collections might have catalog tablets that list the contents of a particular basket or shelf, an early form of library science. Historians still debate the exact organizational principles of different Sumerian archives, as the evidence is often fragmentary, but it's clear that considerable thought went into making this vast amount of information retrievable. Without some system, an archive would quickly become a useless jumble of clay. The air in the archive room is likely cool and dry, conditions favorable for the preservation of sun-dried clay. There's a unique smell, a combination of old clay, dry reeds, if baskets are used for storage, and perhaps the faint, lingering scent of the sesame oil from lamps used by scribes who previously worked or consulted texts here. It's a quiet place, the silence broken only by your own movements, the rustle of a colleague turning a page, if they are consulting a multi-tablet work, or the distant sounds of the sleeping city. Being surrounded by this immense accumulation of recorded human endeavor can be both humbling and inspiring. You are part of a long tradition, a chain of knowledge stretching back to the very invention of writing. The tablet you are currently inscribing will, if it survives, take its place among these silent watchers. It will become another voice, another piece of evidence for future generations. Though you probably aren't thinking in such grand, millennial terms, you're more concerned with getting the current line right. A quirky detail about ancient archives is the discovery of tablet labels, or piece on dubba, literally head of the tablet basket. These were small clay tags, often with a string hole, that would be attached to a basket or container of tablets, summarizing its contents. For example, a label might read, "Tablets concerning the allotment of fields to the plowmen of the temple of Ningirsu, year X of King Y." These labels were crucial for navigating the archives efficiently. Finding one of these little tags is like finding the ancient equivalent of a folder label, a tangible link to how these information systems were managed. Tonight, as you work, the towering presence of these past records is a constant backdrop. They are a reminder of the continuity of administration, the enduring nature of legal precedent, the persistence of religious belief. They represent order, accountability, and memory. The very act of placing your newly completed tablet onto a shelf in this room is an act of committing it to this collective memory. You are not just creating a document. You are contributing to the archive, to the silent, ever-growing chorus of clay voices. The weight of this responsibility and the knowledge that your work will join this vast repository perhaps adds another layer of diligence to your already focused efforts. The archive's silent watchers bear witness to your long night's labor. As the night wears on and you meticulously press wedge after wedge into the damp clay, the deeper significance of your task might begin to crystallize in your weary mind. It's not just about copying words. It's about weaving the very fabric of order that holds Sumerian society together. Your work, and the work of scribes like you across Mesopotamia, is fundamental to the complex administration and social structure of your civilization. Consider the royal edict you might be copying. This single document, once duplicated and distributed, will disseminate the will of the ruler to various officials and districts. It ensures that laws are applied consistently, that taxes are levied fairly, at least in theory, and that public works projects, like the vital maintenance of irrigation canals, are organized efficiently. Without scribes to record and transmit these decrees, a ruler's commands would be limited by the reach of their voice or the memory of messengers, leading to inconsistencies, misunderstandings, and a breakdown of central authority. Your stylus, therefore, is an instrument of governance, extending the power and coherence of the state. Think, too, of the temple inventories. The meticulous records of offerings, assets, and expenditures ensure the temple can function not only as a religious center, but also as a major economic institution. These records track the flow of goods that sustain the priests, priestesses, and temple workers. They document the resources available for rituals that are believed to secure divine favor for the entire community. An error in these accounts could lead to mismanagement, shortages, or even perceived impiety, threatening the spiritual and material well-being of the city. Your careful calculations and lists underpin the temple's ability to fulfill its crucial societal roles. Historians still marvel at the sheer scale of Sumerian temple economies and the detailed accounting systems developed to manage them, all reliant on scribal literacy. Beyond these grand functions, your work touches the lives of ordinary people in countless ways. The legal documents you draft or copy, marriage contracts, adoption papers, loan agreements, land sales, provide a framework for personal and commercial interactions. They offer a means of resolving disputes and ensuring that agreements are honored. While not everyone in Sumer is literate, they all live within a society increasingly structured by written records. A farmer might receive a clay receipt for his barley delivery to the temple granary, a testament to his contribution and a guarantee of his future rations. A merchant undertaking a long-distance trade venture relies on written contracts and inventories to manage his goods and accounts. The very concept of a day off for a corvée worker or the specific amount of barley owed as rent for a particular field is defined and enforced through written records that you help create and maintain. This creates a level of predictability and accountability that would be impossible in a purely oral society. It allows for larger, more complex social and economic systems to develop. You are, in a very real sense, an architect of this order. A quirky, yet profoundly important, aspect of Sumerian scribal activity was the creation and copying of lexical lists. These weren't just random vocabulary lists for students. They were systematic categorizations of the world, lists of gods, trees, animals, stones, professions, geographical names, body parts, and manufactured goods. These lists were more than just study aids. They represented a way of organizing knowledge, of understanding the cosmos and humanity's place within it. By copying and preserving these lists, scribes were perpetuating a shared intellectual framework a common understanding of reality. It was a form of early science of classification, laying the groundwork for future scholarly endeavors. And tonight, even if you're just copying a straightforward administrative text, you are part of this larger tradition of using writing to structure and make sense of the world. So, as you battle fatigue in the dim light, remember that each carefully formed sign contributes to this grander tapestry. Your meticulous copying is not mindless drudgery, though it might feel like it at 3 a.m. It is an act of sustaining civilization. The words you inscribe are binding contracts, authoritative commands, sacred accounts, and the collective memory of your people. The order of Sumer, its laws, its economy, its religious practices all flow in part from the tip of your humble reed stylus. The primary purpose of your all-nighter is undoubtedly the urgent transcription of administrative texts, the royal edict, the temple inventory. These are the bread and butter, or rather, the barley and beer of your scribal duties. The state and the temple demand precision and promptness for these practical, world-ordering documents. However, in the life of a Sumerian scribe, there were occasionally moments, perhaps even during a long night, if a particular task finished early or if a different kind of rush job was required, when the focus shifted from grain and goats to gods and heroes. Not all writing in Sumer was about accounting or law. This civilization, one of the world's earliest, produced a rich and vibrant body of literature, myths detailing the exploits of their deities, epic poems celebrating legendary kings, collections of wise proverbs, hymns of praise and lamentation, and even humorous dialogues or fables. These texts were also preserved on clay tablets, copied and recopied by generations of scribes. While the bulk of your training and daily work might focus on administrative script, part of a full scribal education involved familiarity with these literary works. They were not just entertainment. They encapsulated Sumerian cosmology, ethics, history, as they understood it, and cultural values. Imagine, perhaps, that the primary urgent tasks are nearing completion. The stack of freshly inscribed edict copies is growing. The temple accounts are reconciled. There might be a lull, a brief period before the final push to ensure everything is ready for the morning. Or, perhaps, a priest specifically requests a fresh copy of a particular hymn needed for an upcoming ceremony, or a royal tutor needs a section of an epic for the education of a young prince. In these moments, your stylus might turn from the stark language of administration to the more evocative and metaphorical language of poetry and myth. Copying a literary text presents different challenges and perhaps different satisfactions. While precision is still important, there's also an element of appreciating the artistry of the language, the rhythm of the poetry, even if Sumerian prosody is not fully understood by modern scholars, and the power of the narrative. You might be transcribing the story of Inanna's descent to the underworld, a powerful myth of death and rebirth. Or perhaps you are carefully etching the lines of the Epic of Gilgamesh, recounting his adventures and his poignant quest for immortality. As you write, these ancient stories, already old by your time, come alive again under your hand. Historians still debate the exact context in which much of Sumerian literature was performed or read. Were epics recited at courtly feasts? Were hymns sung in temple rituals? Were proverbs used in everyday instruction? The answer is likely all of the above. What is certain is that scribes were the crucial conduits for the preservation and transmission of this literary heritage. Without their painstaking copying, these foundational works of world literature would have been lost. A quirky aspect of Sumerian literary tablets is the occasional presence of a colophon. This was a short inscription at the end of a tablet, or the last tablet in a multi-tablet series, providing information about the text. It might include the title of the work, the name of the scribe who copied it, the date, the source for which it was copied, and sometimes even a blessing on the reader or a curse on anyone who might damage or steal the tablet. Finding a scribe's name on a literary tablet, like Shusin, son of Lugalmarum, has written this, offers a wonderfully personal connection across the millennia. It's a reminder that these were individuals taking pride in their work. Perhaps, if you're copying a literary piece tonight, you too will add a modest colophon, identifying yourself as the humble instrument of its continuation. So, even amidst the practical demands of bureaucracy, the world of myth, poetry, and wisdom literature is never too far away for a Sumerian scribe. These texts provide context, meaning, and a connection to the cultural heart of your society. While your all-nighter is primarily driven by the mundane necessities of grain and goats, or edicts and inventories, a brief interlude, spent with the gods and heroes, or the pithy wisdom of a proverb, might offer a different kind of sustenance for your weary spirit. It's a reminder that words have power not just to organize the world, but also to enchant, to instruct, and to explore the deepest questions of human existence. The deepest part of the night has passed. The oil in the lamps is burning low, casting even longer, more fitful shadows. Your eyelids feel like they have weights attached to them, and every muscle in your back and shoulders screams in protest. The initial adrenaline rush from the urgent royal decree or the temple's pressing inventory has long since faded, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. Yet, you persevere. The stack of completed tablets beside you is a testament to your endurance, each one a small victory against the encroaching chaos of forgetfulness and disorder. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, a change begins to occur. A subtle lightening in the eastern sky, a slight shift in the quality of the darkness. The first, faint pre-dawn chorus of birdsong might reach your ears from outside the city walls, a sound almost alien after the intense, focused silence of your workspace. This is the moment you've been pushing towards, the finish line of your nocturnal marathon. The sun's first ray, still hours away from directly illuminating your room, is nonetheless making its imminent arrival known. There's a renewed, if somewhat frantic, energy among the scribes. The final checks are made. Are all the copies of the edict complete and accounted for? Are the columns of figures in the temple inventory correctly totaled? Each tablet is handled with care. These are no longer just lumps of damp clay. They are vital documents, imbued with hours of concentrated effort and carrying significant weight. Once a tablet is deemed complete and error-free, or as error-free as humanly possible under the circumstances, it needs to be prepared for its future. Most everyday administrative tablets in Sumer were sun-dried. This was a practical and economical method. The tablets would be laid out, perhaps on reed mats or wooden boards, in a sunny, protected spot, maybe a courtyard or a flat rooftop, to bake hard under the Mesopotamian sun. This process could take several days, depending on the thickness of the tablet and the intensity of the sun. A sun-dried tablet is reasonably durable, but remains vulnerable to water. For truly important documents, royal inscriptions, foundational legal texts, significant literary works, or perhaps even these urgent edicts and inventories that need to last, a more permanent solution was available: firing in a kiln. Baking the clay at high temperatures vitrifies it, turning it into ceramic, making it virtually indestructible by water and far more resistant to physical damage. This is why so many cuneiform tablets have survived for millennia, through fires, floods, and the collapse of empires. Kiln firing was more resource-intensive, requiring fuel, wood or reed bundles, which were not always abundant, and specialized knowledge. Historians still debate how frequently kiln baking was used for administrative texts versus sun-drying, but for documents of critical importance or those intended for long-term archival, firing was the gold standard. Tonight's output, given its urgency and importance, might well be destined for the kiln once the immediate crisis is past. A quirky detail about tablet preservation is the envelope system. For particularly sensitive legal contracts or letters, a scribe might write the text on a small inner tablet, then encase it in a thin layer of clay, forming an outer envelope on which the text was often repeated or a summary written. The envelope would then be sealed. If there was ever a dispute about the contents, the envelope could be broken in the presence of witnesses and the pristine inner tablet consulted. It was an ingenious method of tamper-proofing. While your urgent copies tonight probably don't require individual envelopes, the concept highlights the Sumerian concern for the integrity and security of written information. As dawn officially breaks, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, a sense of weary triumph settles over the edubba. The monumental task is complete. Messengers arrive, ready to take the newly inscribed edicts to their destinations across the city. Temple officials come to collect the crucial inventory lists. Your work, done in the dead of night, will now ripple outwards, influencing the actions and decisions of many as the city awakens. You carefully gather your styli, perhaps wipe them clean. You look at the stacks of tablets, your contribution to the night's effort. There's a profound sense of exhaustion, yes, but also a quiet satisfaction. You, the Sumerian scribe, have once again wielded the power of the written word, battled the encroaching darkness, and helped maintain the intricate order of your world. The sun's first ray touches the top of the ziggurat, and your tablet, your small piece of preserved reality, is ready to face the light of a new day, a testament to the very first all-nighter. The long night is over. Your eyelids are heavy, your mind is slowly, gratefully shutting down. The images of clay and reeds, of flickering lamps and countless wedges begin to soften and blur. You feel the pull of sleep, a deep and profound weariness that promises a heavy, dreamless rest. The urgency has passed. The tablets are complete. The world, for now, is in order. The gentle rhythm of your own breathing becomes the most prominent sound, a soft, steady cadence leading you away from the ancient world and into the quiet embrace of slumber. Let the stories of Sumer fade into the background hum, a distant echo in the vastness of time. You have done your work. Now it is time to rest, to drift to sleep. Sweet dreams,